always been keen on the Sons of Tappet. We've done well with him. He's broken out quite well. He's a beautiful mover, potentially a really nice two-turn horse going forward. We're really kind of very fond of him.
We bought the Tappert filly out of the Blue Eyes in the Rain filly at the Keeneland sale. What we really liked about her was obviously her physique. We liked the way she moved, and we just fell in love with her from the start, really.
Tappert, standing at Gainesway.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kentucky Derby Prep Recap. I'm Dan Illman along with Mike Buer. Our coverage is presented by Gainesway, the home of Tappet, sire of 4 Belmont Stakes winners. Let's take a look back at the Tampa Bay Derby. And as we break from the gate, Mike, Classic Causeway just continued his dominance over the Tampa Bay-based division of 3-year-olds this winter. He never gave this field a chance. He broke like a shot. He took him wire to wire as the odds-on favorite.
Yeah, I mean, he broke very sharply from the gate then, had no trouble making the lead here. And he just, the pace isn't that fast. He looks very comfortable all the way around the track, just on sort of a measured lead the entire way. And there was really never an anxious moment for this horse.
This race was contested over a good track that I feel might have played closer to fast, but you're going to note there's not a lot of closing going on in this race. Classic Causeway gets to the lead. The eventual runner-up is the number 1 Grantham, who's going to win a 4-horse scrum for second, but he never really threatened Classic Causeway. We're going to see on the backstretch a couple of horses very wide. Belgrade, Shipsational, one of them. He ended up being 4 wide on the turn. He makes a run, but he flattened out.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of on the outside the entire trip here, Dan, but he's also right up close to the pace. He's going to take a run at Classic Causeway on the lead here around the second turn. Never can really get up there to challenge this horse in any kind of serious fashion, and he just doesn't really have much of a finish at all. You mentioned that there's not a lot of closing going on in here. Now, it's a pretty slow pace. They weren't moving that fast up there. I guess there's an argument to be made that the closers were up against it. I also think there's an argument to be made that the closers in this race, they just weren't that good.
I think that's a very fair point. We'll get into that. Were you disappointed that Classic Causeway didn't put on a show from a beaten lengths standpoint? Because he had these horses off the bridle at the 5/16, and he kind of just goes on with it. He wins in more of a professional workmanlike fashion than in a brilliant fashion. But again, the outcome was never in doubt.
Yeah, it wasn't. I wouldn't say I was disappointed in the final margin there, Dan. I mean, this horse to me never really got down to serious business. I mean, yeah, I guess you would have maybe, if you were thinking, long term with this horse, maybe you'd like to see him, really put the boots to this field. But I don't know, man. He just looked very comfortable all the way around the track, and he won easy.
So to put you on the spot, the question I have for you regarding Classic Causeway is he a true top-tier Kentucky Derby contender, as many folks will have him ranked based on the fact that he's won his 2 races at Tampa Bay Downs very, very easily. He's done little wrong in his career. Or will you simply say he's just beaten a bad bunch in his last 2 races?
I could, argue a little bit of both sides of that one. I happen to think he's a good horse, Dan. He was a good 2-year-old. I think obviously the real question with Classic Causeway come, the bigger races where he's going to meet some different horses. And of course, the Kentucky Derby over a longer trip is, what's going to happen when he lands in a race where, he isn't in control of the pace, because in his last 2 races, that's sort of been the case for him. So we'll see what happens there. It seems like there's plenty of other speed headed to the Kentucky Derby if Classic Causeway gets there. But man, at this point, I don't really feel like I'm in a position to knock this horse that hard. He's been pretty impressive in his last 2 wins.
Despite having not raced since September, Major General for Todd Pletcher was the second choice in this race at 4-1. He did not get off to a good start, but he didn't pick up his feet thereafter. And it's very, very difficult when you're on the road to the Kentucky Derby to just throw in a complete flop and all of a sudden recover. You've got to have some sort of fitness. I don't think this horse really gained anything from this race at all.
Yeah, it was very disappointing, even with all the excuses, I guess, that you could sort of heap on this horse for his performance. He did stumble at the start and then was sort of outrun in a race where they didn't go fast in front of him. The flip side of that, Dan, is, even though he won both of his starts as a 2-year-old, they weren't fast races. And even after the stumble at the start here, he was just basically in a full-out drive all the way around the track. And he never made any kind of progress in the race, out of contention by the time this field reached the quarter pole. He was super disappointing. Pletcher is usually great off of layoffs. He brought 3 horses back on that Saturday card at Tampa, and none of them ran particularly strong races.
I think you could argue that Chipsational ran the second best race, considering the amount of ground he lost. He was 5 wide on the backstretch. He made a move at Classic Causeway, was put to a bit of a hard chase on the turn, and he flattened out just a little bit. But I think this exposes him a bit. He's a very nice New York bred. He's as honest as the day is long. I don't think he's a top-class Derby horse, but he's got points, and there really isn't any reason to at least give him one more shot on the trail.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with all that. I certainly am not necessarily looking at him as a serious Derby horse right now either. But listen, it's not like there's a ton of fast 3-year-olds out there, at least at this point. You sort of expect that they're going to get faster in the next few weeks. I guess they could take one more shot with this horse. I remain a huge fan of Chipsacious. I think he's a really nice horse. There are races for him, probably not the Triple Crown races.
Happy Boy Rocket went off at 9-1. He was the fourth choice in this race for trainer Bill Mott. He was being tested for class, stepping up out of a win at Gulfstream Park, and he just didn't run very well in this race. Didn't break well.
Yeah, I'd be willing to be a little lenient on him. Obviously, this wasn't a good performance. He did get bumped pretty solidly at the start of this race, and not only bumped in, but sort of pushed way back into the field. Always way off the pace. He was actually widest around the second turn as his rider tried to, make some kind of a run with him. He couldn't reach contention. He got very tired through the stretch, but man, it was only his third career start right off of his maiden win and his first 2 starts. I thought he'd shown a little potential there. I wouldn't get too down on him, at least just off of this race.
Giant Game went off at 12-1. He hit the board in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He had an excuse for his first start at Gulfstream in the Holy Bull when he flipped his pallet. The problem is he ran the same race here. He was up close to the pace, and then when it was time to ask the question, there was nothing there.
Yeah, horrific performance from Giant Game. Who knows if he has an excuse this time. I was thinking about it after the race, Dan, of course, because just felt like at the price that he wound up going off at here, he was maybe one you would want to, give him the benefit of the doubt. He came out of the Holy Bull with the excuse, and you wanted to see if he could rebound here. Obviously, he did not do that. It was awful. So I was thinking about it afterwards. I mean, you hear that excuse a lot from trainers that they displaced in their prior race and it's been corrected. They're going to come back and run better. Has that ever been the case? Are there any horses who displaced in a big race and then actually turned out to be good?
I think our friend and colleague David Aragona mentioned that on Twitter as well, saying that's the new excuse for a cuppy racetrack that the old trainers used to use back in the days to sort of say, well, he had an excuse for a bad performance.
Yeah, he didn't handle the track is always a popular one. I do want to say, though, I'm pretty sure that back in our time, when we're old now, Dan, I want to say that might have been one of the excuses Holy Bull got along the Derby Trail. Maybe in his Fountain of Youth where he ran very poorly. I want to say Jimmy Kroll said he displaced that day and they corrected it.
Let's talk a little bit about Grantham, Mike, who was 37-1. And I guess you could see an improved performance coming because in his last race in New York, he was chasing a very, very fast pace. And while he was no match for the impressive winner early voting, he just, it's not like he completely gave up the ghost like some of the other horses that were on the chase that day. He had a much easier pace scenario in here. He obviously gets points for the Kentucky Derby. He'll get another opportunity. I feel the same way about him as I do about Subsational and the rest of the horses that chase Classic Causeway this winter at Tampa Bay Downs. But, this horse might have something.
Yeah, he's also very lightly raced, and at least he got second here off of a really good trip, though, just saving all the ground up close to a moderate pace and never really made up any ground at all on Classic Causeway through the stretch. Listen, his prior race, the Withers, was fine, not really totally collapsing after chasing a fast pace. I guess this performance was fine as well. So far, he hasn't really done anything to make you feel like he's a serious horse going forward.
Belgrade sold for $700,000 after winning his only start as a 2-year-old. He won his prep for this race at Tampa Bay Downs. And did you see any excuse for him, or was this just simply a situation of perhaps too much too soon?
Yeah, I would maybe that. And I would also, as far as Belgrade goes, I'd be worried about distance with him going forward. He was another one who was back off the pace and always on the outside here. He did try to make a wide run around the turn, but he did not come close. And he really didn't have any kind of a finish at all, going up and down there about the final 1/8 of a mile.
Is there anyone in this race that you saw any sort of excuse, any sort of interesting move during the race where, again, I don't consider anyone other than Classic Causeway in this race any sort of Kentucky Derby or Triple Crown threat, but a horse to watch in lower level races?
Not really. I mean, I didn't think the fourth place finisher, Golden Glider, who was almost 40 to 1. I mean, I didn't think he ran terrible. He was further away from the pace than the second, third, and fifth place finishers who were all right up close. This horse was off it. He, managed to get around Giant Game, who was stopping in his face around the second turn. And I thought he finished okay. I mean, he was basically in the photo, Dan. He could have gotten second there at the end. It wasn't, a great performance, but it wasn't terrible.
Let's take a look at Classic Causeway's horse card. Again, never off the board from 5 starts. He's by Giant's Causeway out of a Thunder Gulch mare. You'd have to think that distance isn't going to be an issue for this horse. He has raced 4 consecutive times at a mile and a 16th. He should have plenty of foundation for his next prep, which will likely come at a mile and an 1/8. Looking at Classic Causeway's speed figure from this race, Mike, it only came back in 84. I think that has to be considered worrisome.
Yeah, he still is another one who hasn't run that fast race. Again, there's not that many of those fast races out there at this point, Dan. And we, listen, it's hard to get big speed figures when you're going slow paces. I'll just point out that this horse ran a faster race off the layoff in the Sam F. Davis. And he ran a faster race in his career debut as a 2-year-old. So he has faster races in his past.
It's true. He's yet to get back to that debut, however. A 90-buyer effort in his only race sprinting to date. Classic Causeway, 5 starts. He's dominated them at Tampa Bay over the winter. Wins in the Sam F. Davis, wins at the Tampa Bay Derby. Fair to say, though, that the waters will now get much deeper.